Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Live from My Mother's Basement with, I'm going to say, the greatest guest I've had to date. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Mantegna came down to the basement. It's not the real basement in New Jersey like I wish it was, but it is part of the basement like what we do here in Los Angeles, California. We got some great chatter we're gonna have. We're gonna have some great talks we got some great food, and I got a great celebrity guest. Joe, thank you. Thank you for coming over.
You got him.
I had a little bit of a glitch on my Instagram. Is it working now?
I don't even know how to get on the Instagram.
Isn't it funny how everything changed so much that instead of going to a radio channel like you did back in the day, you actually have to go to somebody's house and you can go on their Instagram channel, you can go on their Facebook channel, you can go on their YouTube channel, and then you wonder what happened to other people in the world and their situations. But here we are, we're having some fun, and we're going to tell some great stories. Here we go. Had a little bit of a glitch over here. Here's our third camera. Watch.
Perfect.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Come on in. Come and say hello. Third camera. There it is. You know what's really funny? Well, hopefully everything that we're going to do is going to be funny. We're both Italian, but we're both from different states. And I didn't want to say anything until we were rolling right now. You still have a little bit of an accent from Chicago to me.
You think?
Yes, because you said the word battery.
Battery. If I said three guys over there, too. That would
There.
probably do it.
I can't even imitate there.
Oh, yeah.
How did you say that?
Well, that's the only way I could talk. I always said that when Dennis Farina and Dennis Franz and I would get together, the Wrigley building would appear. Just would kind of come out of like Brigadoon, out of the mist.
Yeah,
just from our accents.
They were all Chicago guys, huh?
Oh, yeah. Very Chicago. They make me sound like I'm from London.
There was one guy, I think you just mentioned his name. Was he in the movie with De Niro?
Dennis Farina. You talking about?
No, not Dennis Farina. He played a lot of mobsters. I just remember this one specific line, and you could hear that Chicago accent. I'm going to take this pencil and shove it in your eye.
Joey Pants is in New York, though.
Joey Pants was in it too, of course. But
Yeah.
I think he said it to him.
Yeah.
Joey Pants kept saying, it's a midnight run, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
What guy am I thinking of? I think he played the cop.
Was it Farina?
Is Dennis Farina?
Dennis Farina.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, it was Farina.
Those Chicago guys.
Oh, Farina was a Chicago cop for 18 years.
Wow. Isn't it amazing some people actually go from one end of the spectrum to another? He was a cop and then he became an actor.
You know what it was is when Michael Mann was making the movie Thief in Chicago with James Caan, Dennis was the Chicago copper on the set. Just to have the Chicago copper on the set, you have to have a copper there, to make just kind of. And he would talk to Michael Mann, and Michael Mann, the director-producer, was so intrigued by Dennis. He said, you know what, have you ever considered... And Dennis had been doing little acting around town, like little things, like little neighborhood theaters. Yeah. And Michael put him in, like, next thing you know, put some little bit in this movie. He put him in Thief, I think a little bit part, playing a copper. But from there, he did Crime Story, did a series, and started then Dennis's career took off and became, what he became.
It's interesting how that happens to a good amount of people who didn't start out as actors. I spent a good amount of time being friends with, rest in peace, Danny Aiello.
Yeah.
And I remember when he was telling me that he really didn't get a grasp on being in show business till he was in his 40s.
Oh, yeah. Danny was... He would call out the trains. He was that, whatever the name of that guy who would go, next, go Flatbush. He did that. He was the voice at Grand Central Station.
Was he really?
Yeah. That's ridiculous. We did a movie together, Danny and I, with George Hamilton. George Hamilton and I did a movie in Madrid, Spain. And also, we shot so great. We shot in Paris and Madrid. It was called Off Key. But anyway, we spent a whole summer together, the three of us. And Danny, what a piece of work! But that's a guy that literally came from, calling out train stops.
I think it was called the conductor because somebody's writing in right now going conductor.
No, but it wasn't on the train.
No, it wasn't the conductor.
He wasn't the conductor. He's the guy in the station. When you went in the station, you heard over the loudspeaker goes, the train at station, track number 4 going to Poughkeepsie and the Yeah, it was Danny.
I heard your accent again.
Yeah.
Track number 4.
Track number 4 over there. the three guys over there. I'm doing my Dennis Franz impersonation, which always cracked me up because I'm thinking he was the star of NYPD Blue.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm thinking he did that for like 11 years. And I'm thinking, so people who watched that show thought that guys from New York, from NYPD Blue, talk like this, which is he had the strongest Chicago accent of any human on the planet Earth. You know. So what are you gonna do?
It's amazing how that actually is a reality in show business, because I remember when I would audition for things and they would say, you sound too East Coast, and I wouldn't get the job. And here's a guy from Chicago playing a cop in New York City,
Right.
and he got the job.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, in real life, people do travel.
Yeah, they travel.
They live in different
that's
states.
True. That's true.
Why wouldn't there be a cop in New York that's from Chicago?
Yeah, exactly
You
right.
don't have to be that
I
specific.
just thought it was ironic. NYPD
Of
Blue
course.
starring the guy that talks like
that.
this.
Oh,
Great.
I remember when I used to ride the subway system in New York City when I was a kid, because that's where I grew up trying to make my way in the acting business. And you would ride those trains, and yeah, you heard the guy, it's the 8 train, comes into 42nd, next stop, 8th. And if you didn't hear it,
Right.
there's a chance you're on the wrong train.
Exactly.
But I had a lot of fun riding trains back in that time, and now I wouldn't go down there. I'd be petrified.
Yeah, well, it's a different day, different time.
Yeah, you ain't kidding. But you got into the acting world from a young age.
Well, I got exposed to it in high school. I mean, there was no reason for me to become an actor. I mean, there's nobody in my family in it. There was no show business connection. I never even saw a play till I was like 16, because my brother, I remember he was 8 years older than I am. I remember he got tickets to a play and would take his girlfriend, and they accidentally put an extra ticket in the envelope when he mailed in for the tickets. So he had 3 tickets. So he says, "Well, can we take my little brother?" Because I was like 15 at the time. She said, "Yeah, sure." So I went along, and I remember I fell asleep during it. It was like, I forget the play. It was some off-Broadway play that had come to Chicago. So it wasn't like I had this thing of like theater in my blood or anything. But what happened was, when the movie West Side Story came out, I was so taken by that movie. I must have saw it 8 times, because those were the days when, as long as you stayed in the theater, they didn't throw you out.
Right.
You know, you could just sit there and keep watching. So I must have seen like about 5 times in a row. And then my high school, I was a junior in high school, they had signs up saying, "We're going to be doing West Side Story. Please come and audition." And I was like, what are they talking about? I saw the movie. I didn't even know that it was a play, that it had been based on a play. I was so ignorant to theater at the time. But I was so intrigued by the idea of West Side Story. I says, well, I'll try out. This is because I love that movie so much. Maybe they needed, a little skinny Italian kid, which I was at the time, to be like in it. Now, as it turned out, I didn't get cast, but at the audition, the auditioning process was almost like, it was like going to Mars, because it was up at this little theater at night, and the kids are running around in black leotards. Like, who are these people? I was not. They were like people from another planet. But I was so taken with it. I thought, I want to keep trying this out, and so I kind of kept at it. And I've never looked back. That was over 60 years ago, maybe.
So 16 years old in Chicago, you're checking out the play West Side Story. Now, I think West Side Story had to have affected so many different people, because I wanted to be one of the Jets.
Sure.
As soon as I saw that movie, I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to be a Jet. I don't want to do the ballet, but I want to be a Jet.
Yeah, you'd have been a good riff.
I'd have been a good rep. I can't sing and I can't dance.
Well,
now I
that's
really
it.
can't dance.
Yeah, there you go. That cuts into it a little bit.
I could do the funny version of riff, like, hey, that hurt. But I remember watching the movie as well, saying to myself, boy, I would really like to be an actor. And I think just like you, my family doesn't come. My mother comes from Italy. That's the truth in the stand-up show that I do. My mother, for real, all her brothers and sisters, they're all first born in Italy and then came over. My father was already here. I was born in the United States. So nobody in my family knew anything about acting. It's just that when I was born, all I wanted to do was impersonate people. I wanted to crack jokes. I wanted to be the life of the party. And then when I was 16 years old, I had a high school teacher who was teaching music. And I played the drums. I read about how you played the bass guitar. We got to talk about that. Yeah. Being friends with the guys in Chicago.
Right. The band
Still,
oh,
greatest band alive.
In my mind, they are, yeah.
Huh. So I would start going into New York City, and I was taking acting lessons. But even when I was taking acting lessons, I had to be funny somehow. I just couldn't take it seriously too long.
Yeah,
I
well,
had
it
to
was,
crack
in
a
your,
joke or
it was
two.
in your blood to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously.
I don't mean to go off track, but I
No,
did
no,
read
no,
about
that is
that,
the
the
track.
Chicago. So you played the bass.
I was in a band in the mid '60s. We did it as a joke, actually. Initially, it's four of us guys, four Italian guys. I was in, I think, our English class. They wanted
See, that's actually really funny to me. 4 Italian guys in an English class.
Yeah, exactly.
We ended up creating a band.
Well, the assignment was bring something, do a project that shows the culture of England. You know what I mean? They wanted, and so the four of us got together and said, the Beatles had just come out.
Oh.
So we said, well, that's cultural. I mean, it's music. They're very popular. They're from England. So as a joke, you know, I really didn't know how to play the bass at that time, but the one guy, the lead guitar player, was a wonderful musician. He had a guitar. He had another guy there played rhythm guitar. There was a guy, a drummer, a kid who played drums. And I was into singing, so they figured, well, we'll give you a guitar and you just play the bass strings. We'll show you what to do. And we'll just do a song as a joke. Like, so this is our thing, our project for English culture. And we did a song. We did a Beatles song. It was Please Please Me, you know, last night, you know, we did it for the class. And the class went nuts because it was like a joke. But they took it seriously because we actually sounded pretty good. So we thought, after we did that, they said, well, would you guys do that like at an assembly for the school? Learn a couple songs, it'd be fun. So we took them seriously. We got little wigs. We had the drummer's sister made us these collarless jackets like the Beatles wore. And we did like 3 songs at an assembly. And the place went nuts. So of course we started to think, wait a minute, maybe we can make a little scharol doing this, you know. So we started playing sock hops and things like that. To cut to the chase, we became a band, and we were doing all right. And we started playing. We were together about 5 years, and about 4 years into it, we were playing out in Kentucky, for the Kentucky State Fair in Louisville. And we're playing with Bobby Sherman, The Outsiders, Cannibal and the Headhunters. They had that song, Land of a Thousand Dances. But then they hired a band to kind of just back up the single groups.
Right.
And there was a band called The Missing Links. The Missing Links ultimately became the band Chicago. And that's why I got to be so close to them. Because they were there, and we liked them. They were such great musicians because they could back up the other guys. They could all read music, and they're playing, and we're thinking, no, these guys are great. So then later on, we're all back in Chicago, the city of Chicago, playing. We were playing at a place called the Cheetah. There was one in New York, and there was one in Chicago.
Cheetah?
The Cheetah. It was a teen nightclub. It was great. It was a pretty popular venue back in the 60s. So we're playing the Cheetah. The guys from the Missing Links come to see us, and they tell us, they go, hey, we're starting a new band. We're breaking up the Missing Links. We're going to add a trombone. We're going to add a trumpet. Because they just had the sax, the guitar, drums, and bass at the time. We're adding it. We're going from a 4-piece band to a 7-piece band. And we're going, oh yeah, that's great. And we're thinking when we left, what are they, nuts? They're going from 4 to 7? Because everything was about trying to make a little more bread. You know, you add a member to the band, you just split the pie slice. And they said, we're going to change the name. We're going to become the Chicago Transit Authority. We're thinking, oh yeah, great. They're going to name themselves after a bus. You know,
but back in the subway.
How good are they going to be? You know, well, needless to say, you know, they struggled for a while because they would only do original music. That was the thing. And there literally were nights when our band would get a call. We'd be on an off night and we'd get a call from one of these teen nightclubs saying, can you guys get over here because this goddamn band, the Transit Authority guys, they won't play the top 40 stuff. They wanted to play their own stuff. And the kids were like, no, man, we want to hear, you know. And we were like whores. We'd play whatever they want.
Yeah.
So we went. We'd replace them. We'd go, oh, sorry, guys, thinking, when are they going to learn? And of course, the first album came out, and that's when I realized I got no business in rock and roll. You know, we were a good cover band. That's all we were going to be. And so I went on to acting, and they continued on as the band Chicago, and they've done very good without any of my advice.
Well, everybody knows the band Chicago. Now, a lot of people who are watching this show realize how Chicago actually started. Was their first album named Chicago? Transit Authority, right?
Chicago Transit Authority, CTA, yeah. That was the first
And then they cut that end off and just went with Chicago.
And what it was is the Chicago Transit Authority they made them cut it off.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, because before they got really, I mean, in retrospect, they probably are sorry they did that because they could have used the,
Yes.
you know. But
They,
when
they
they
might
first,
have even been able to had some rights to some of their songs.
yeah, but they instead they said no, you can't use that name. I think they were worried. What if they turned out to be like all druggies or something? Who knows? But whatever. But these guys are great guys, great musicians, great human beings.
So
But
did
they
you have
changed
the
the name.
opportunity to play the bass in Chicago, or they already had their
No. I never played with them in the band. No, but we played with them, like we toured with them, like and played similar gigs and stuff like that, same gigs. But I never played. But I'm still very close to them. I just narrated a documentary on them.
Oh, no kidding.
Just about 2 months ago. This guy Peter Pardini. He's the nephew of one of the keyboard players. They got 2 keyboard players now. You know, band's changed over the years.
Sure.
Lou Pardini is their one of the keyboard guys, and his nephew Peter is like their documentarian. They did an HBO special on them, I think, a few years ago, and I'm actually in that. They interviewed me for that. But this thing now is just a documentary about the band, and I narrate the documentary. So, and I gave the band their Lifetime Grammy Award.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, about maybe less than 2 years ago. Because of COVID, they didn't have a live event, so they did a virtual event, and they went out and taped, you know, all the different people presenting the awards to. There's about 3 different acts that got Lifetime Grammys, and so I gave the speech for them to get their Lifetime Grammy Award, which was great.
Well, that's a really great story. I mean, in my head, I'm hearing all the songs. Chicago is a great band, and who even knew? And then when you listen to where your career started, it's pretty interesting. So you really started in theater.
Yeah, that's all really I did for the first 15 years. Like
Were your
I said,
parents looking at you like you going where to do what?
I'll tell you.
You wanna what?
I'll tell you how. Yeah, this is pretty funny. Yeah, I started in theater. The first thing I did was to play Hair. 1969, I got cast. I studied acting in high school, like I said, when I did after West Side Story, took the drama department. Then I went to the Scoodman School of Drama, which was now part of DePaul University in Chicago. I was there for a couple of years studying acting, wanting to be an actor. I tried out for to play Hair because I had done musicals in high school and junior college.
Right.
And I was doing
So
pretty
you can
good.
sing.
Yeah, I was
I
a lead
can't.
singer in the band. So I tried out for Hair. I get cast. As it turns out, the girl who plays Jeannie, to this day, she's my wife. We've been together over 50 years now.
Is that right?
Yeah, so that's how we got together doing the play Hair. So anyway, then from there I did Godspell after that. I really thought musical comedy was going to be my ticket. I thought I was going to be like, you know, one of those guys that just did musicals all his life. But my career took another spin.
Well,
But talking about, to get to your thing about, you know, even with your earlier thing about like your parents not understanding what you're doing. My mother lived to be 101 years old.
yes.
And at 101, she just stopped. She wasn't sick. She just went, that's it, I'm out. So we're.
I don't mean to laugh. I remember.
It is. If you knew my mother, she would
101.
live. 101. So we're at the funeral now in Chicago. This is just a couple years ago. My brother gets up to speak first. Who's, like I said, he's older than I am. And he gets up, and one thing he says, I don't think my brother Joey even knows this. I'm sure he doesn't. But when he got the TV show Criminal Minds, our mother called him. And my brother answers the phone. My mother goes, Ronnie, I'm worried about Joey. And my brother says to her, why? And she says, he's only working an hour a week. And she was dead serious. Because like all this during my career, she never really quite understood what I did for a living. You know, we'd call her and we'd say, Mom, I'm going to be in this movie, or I'm going to watch this show. And then she'd watch it, but she assumed, well, you know, I'm working somehow leading up to that, and that's okay. You know, she didn't put 2 and 2 together. But now she's being told every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock, you can see Joey on the show. And she would do that, and then she would think, well, wait a minute, she's on there from 9 to 10 every Wednesday. What could he possibly make a living? So she was worried. She wanted to send me like $20 or something. My brothers had to tell her, no, he's fine. It's the hour a week is okay. And I think that's, in a way, it's kept me hopefully level-headed, because I always thought, how can I take this business so seriously when my own mother didn't really understand what I did for a living, really, which is fine, you know. All she cared about was, how's your children? How's your daughter? You know, that's, you know, all she cared about was the grandchildren, which is as it should be. And my job was just like, She thought it was cute that, in fact, the one when she went saw Searching for Bobby Fischer, they asked her, interviewed her about it. So, what'd you think of it? She goes, "Oh, I liked him in that movie because he didn't get whacked." Because usually I would get whacked. I mean, in Godfather 3, I got whacked. I mean, I got whacked in a lot of movies back then, you know. And so she appreciated the fact when she went to the movies and saw me, and I made it all alive, you know. So anyway, that's talking about family and how they, relate to your occupation.
I think I went through the same thing in the beginning years. My mother used to say all the time like this, your father saw you on television the other night, but he's doing construction in the morning and he needs you. I'm like, well, I don't do that no more. Why? You got nothing to do. You were on TV last night.
Yeah,
You're free tomorrow.
Hey, and the hourly on the construction is good. That's right. I get it.
I could never sing, and I always wanted to sing. I was never really good at theater. However, I was going to the American Academy and I was going to Herbert Berghof Studios because I wanted so badly just to be an actor. But I really didn't want to wasn't my goal to set out to do Broadway or off-Broadway. I just wanted to be in the film business. But when I started out, I had blonde hair and blue eyes. My blonde hair was very thick, so I could book a potato chip commercial just by saying hello. And I thought, well, this is the greatest thing possible.
Right.
Until you hit 25 and you don't look so young anymore and you're not in that category. But what would you rather do if you had all choices? Live performing or film and television? Because I get that question.
Yeah, of course.
And I love being a live performer.
Yeah, I don't think anything could do. That'd be like asking Sinatra, did you rather enjoy singing in front of people who are out there screaming for you or being in the booth making the record? There's an enjoyment to both. Just like I say, making a film or doing a television show, there's an enjoyment. But you think about it, the enjoyment, actually, the process is enjoyable. And then you get to appreciate it months and whatever it is later, sometimes a year later when the product is there. But nothing can substitute that interaction of you doing a performance, and there's a connection with the audience. And the best definition I give is when people say, I've often been asked, and you may have been asked that too, what's the biggest difference between performing live and performing for film or television? And I say one of the big things is when you perform in a theater, as you know, usually it's at night. You're doing it on a similar schedule every night. You do it, it's got a beginning, a middle, of an end. And when you finish, you're energized because you've drawn all this energy from the audience who've been part of it. And afterwards, you leave the theater, it's 10, 11, sometimes 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant, you're with friends, you're drinking, you're energized. You don't go right home and knock out. The TV and movie business is the exact opposite. You go to work usually very early in the morning. You're doing stuff that's all scattered. You might be doing the last scene first, the first scene last. You're doing bits and pieces. And at the end of the day, you're like fatigued because all this energy you've put out has been stop and go, and it's been sucked out through this camera, and you've gotten no feedback from this audience. So it's the exact opposite of what you're feeling, emotional wise. And to me, that's a big difference. I love doing it all, but you can't really. It's really apples and oranges performing.
So when you have opportunity to do a play, if you're not working on a TV show and it's something you like, you do it.
Well, I used to do it more then than now. Well, because it's usually a much bigger commitment. I mean, like I said, the first 15 years, all I did was theater. And then when I would work on Broadway, Glengarry Glen Ross, 1984, that play changed my life. I won the Tony Award. The show won some Pulitzer Prize. I wound up doing it on Broadway for over a year, toured with Peter Falk for 6 months. Then a few years later, I do Speed the Plow on Broadway with Madonna. Ran that for whatever it was, almost a year. So the
You're gonna
theater
have to back up just for a minute because I want to cover so much of this stuff. And I know that you won the Tony, and I know you won. You worked a lot with this Mamet.
David Mamet, sure,
Mamet.
a lot of stuff. Yeah.
But could we even say what was Peter Falk like? There was a time where Columbo was the most impersonated character from comedians.
Oh yeah.
Everybody had to do that.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
excuse me, ma'am.
Oh,
I
yeah.
even tried it.
Oh sure, yeah. Kevin Pollak does a great one. And when he came to because the thing about Peter, we became very, very close.
I could imagine you're in the play every night.
For 6 months we toured together. We stayed very close. In fact, his wife had it that I was basically the only person she lets visit him his last few days because he was he was suffering, was getting a little bit of dementia, and there was no reason for, a lot of people to come and visit him, but I
Right.
did. And so the one thing I wanted to do is, after he passed, he had never got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Now, of course, they offered it to him back in the '70s, early when Columbo was big. But you have to follow through when they give you that kind of that honor and call you and say, you've been selected to get this star. You got to follow through. Peter was one of those guys that he never picked the day. He didn't really care. That was Peter.
Really?
Yeah, he really did. So here he passes away, had never gotten it, and I say to myself, I got to change that. This is wrong. I mean, people walk those streets. Columbo is such an icon.
Yes.
So they do it posthumously, but you have to go through the process. So I contacted the two networks, the main network that had Columbo on when it was first done, and then I contacted the network that does all the, I think it's MeTV or whatever it is, who does them, and I got them both to kind of pitch in half and half, because there is a fee that goes with it once the star just doesn't happen. This
Right.
little Schkadol gets changed hands.
For you
So-
English-speaking people, Schkadol it costs a little bit of money.
Yeah, a little bit
Okay,
of money.
go ahead.
So anyway, they agreed to do it, and then we picked a day, and you're allowed two people to speak on your behalf. And since Peter, and of course then the person who gets the star gets to speak, so you have three people speaking. So I spoke on Peter's behalf because he had passed, and I had kind of spearheaded making this happen.
Right.
And then I brought in Paul Reiser and Ed Begley Jr. to also speak, because these were also two friends of his that he had worked with. And then the other request I made, and which was granted, is I picked when I had my star, like I think it was 2011. You get to choose where it is if there's an open spot. In other words, if they have a spot available and you.
Really? So was there like a map, and they say,
Well,
where
they go walk the streets and see if you could, because there's a lot of that are just blank stars on the street, and if there's
Right.
a blank and you want that blank, you can usually get it if you're chosen to get a star. So I did that, and then Errol Flynn was my hero as a kid, because
Right.
the movie Robin Hood, I always loved that movie. He was my hero. So I went to Errol Flynn's star, and there was an empty spot next to him. So I said, I'll take that. So that's where my star is, right next to Errol Flynn. So to get Peter's star, the next star, Errol Flynn's on one side of me, and the other side is Debbie Reynolds. But then there's an empty star here. And I said, since we have to choose, and his wife wanted me to be able to choose, I said, well, I'd like to be close to Peter. So they put his star. We got Debbie Reynolds between us, which is not a bad spot to be. So
That's just unbelievable.
if you walk down the Hollywood Walk of Fame, you'll walk over Peter Falk, you'll walk over Debbie, and then you'll get to me, and then you'll get to Errol Flynn.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to tell everybody who's watching, we're going to superimpose me and my crew
There you go.
going over to the Walk of Fame, take some pictures and superimpose it into this episode, because that's a great story. And I didn't know Paul Reiser would be friends with...
Well, the way it happened is Paul had written a movie and wanted Peter Falk to play his father. And he knew how close I was to Peter.
Oh, is that right?
And he had never met him. So he called me and said, do you think you could set up just a meeting with Peter Falk and I, because I want to pitch this movie to him? I said, well, let me see. So I called Peter. I said, Peter, it's Paul Reiser explaining he's got this movie, thinks he'd be great as his dad. Would you at least meet with him on it? And he did, and he liked it, and he made the movie. So
No kidding.
Yeah. So that made that connection.
What an unbelievable story. And then we have to touch on Madonna, because he's another Italian icon.
Yeah, that was wonderful. That was well, what had happened with that is I had done the movie House of Games for David Mamet. This is like 1980s.
Now, you guys really did a lot of work together.
We did a lot of
So I
stuff
guess it's
together.
true to some certain degree that Hollywood people tend to work together quite often. You know each other.
It makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you hire or be with the people you've known? Like David and I go back to the early 70s in Chicago. He was a struggling playwright. I was a struggling actor. We kind of met each other. He would ask me to do readings of his. When he wrote the play American Buffalo, he had just written it. And I was with this theater company called the Organic Theater in Chicago with Dennis Franz, Meshack Taylor. We were with this theater company. Mamet was just a struggling playwright in town. Asked if, would you guys read this new thing I've written so I can hear it? So we did the original reading of American Buffalo, right out of the typewriter for
No
him.
kidding.
Yeah. So that's how our relationship
Typewriter.
started. You know, he used to do it always on a typewriter. And so that's how that whole, relationship, started with Dave. But so jump cut now years later, we've worked a lot in Chicago, he gives me the call, I get to do Glengarry Glen Ross, that changes my life. He wins the Pulitzer, or I get the Tony, everything's great. So now we make this movie, and it's the first time David's directing a movie, House of Games. Well, the movie comes out, Madonna sees the movie. Now at this point I didn't know her and I hadn't met her. She writes a letter to Mammoth saying, I saw the movie House of Games. I think it's one of the best things I've seen in my life. If ever you write anything that you think I would be right for, I would love to do it.
How could you imagine that?
So that, just shortly thereafter, Speed the Plow, this play he'd written about Hollywood, or, about the movie business. It was a 3-character play with her, myself, and Ron Silver. They thought, well, here's that, what a fortuitous time to get the letter. So they cast her in the play, and the 3 of us did that play on Broadway. And her and I got to be pretty close, because then a few years later, she did the movie Body of Evidence with Willem Dafoe. And I'm also in that. And so the 3 of us kind of were the leads in that movie. And to this day, I just saw her not that long ago at her house, because she's, they're I don't know what stage it's in, but they're making a movie about her life. But starting when she's like a young girl. Hopefully they'll make this movie of her. I hadn't seen her in a long time, so just like I said, this was just, God, maybe a little over a year ago that we did a reading of this movie, and she asked me to read the part of her dad, because it starts with her as a little girl. So I play her dad in this reading as when she was a little girl. So I was flattered because I got to meet her. I got to know her dad from when we did Speed the Plow.
See, that's just so incredible to probably a large amount of people, because you're meeting these celebrities and you get to work with them, but then again, you're a celebrity yourself. So then you take like the average person who doesn't see these people and they wonder, how is that even possible? That goal is being achieved. Because now let's just take, for instance, myself. I break my ass, I travel like crazy, and I try to be kind and caring and a great entertainer wherever I go. And then I start becoming friends with guys like yourself. And people will say to me, how the hell do you know Joe Mantegna? And you feel like going, well, there really is a story behind it, just the way you're telling the stories behind it. So it's exciting still for me to meet everybody and anybody. I have the utmost respect for you and everybody you've introduced me to. We're going to talk about that too, because I became good friends with them. Yeah. Lucky enough to keep working with them, like our mutual friend Ronnie. But we're going to get to that.
Yeah, but you earned it, because I remember the first time I saw you. It was an event, I think it was in San Pedro, and you were performing at this, whatever the thing was. I don't even remember what the event was, but you were part of the entertainment for that event. Mm-hmm. And when you came on, I was like, this guy's fantastic. I loved you. I thought you were so good. And I'm sure I came up to you and told you that. And I remember that kind of like, whatever, started that ball rolling,
Well, how did you feel when you first started meeting these people on your way up?
Well, you know what, it's just, I'll give you an instance. I remember when I was shooting the movie Godfather 3, the first day, we were shooting in Cinecittà Studios, which is famous studios where Fellini made a lot of his movies.
Where is it?
Rome. So in Rome, Italy, I'm at Cinecittà Studios. I'm about to shoot this first scene of my first day in Godfather 3. Of course, I'd already done some things at this point. My career was going well, but they're about to say action, and I'm standing on a set. And it's the scene. Anybody's familiar with the movies? The scene was just a big banquet like room, and I walk around and I basically insult everybody and whatever. I paid the price at the end, but anyway. But we're getting ready to say action, and I'm looking. I'm thinking, here's Al Pacino standing in front of me, looking up at me, because my first line is going to be to him. I'm thinking, oh, that's Al Pacino. That's Michael Corleone from this movie, The Godfather, that I saw, 18 years ago. That's one of the greatest movies that ever existed. Then I look over here and I see Francis Coppola, who's about to yell action, over here. And then I'm looking at all the different actors and from the past movie, and I have that little tinge of like, what? Whoa, nervousness. Like, This is unbelievable. But then, almost instantly, what goes through my head is I went, wait a minute. I'm here because this is where I wanted to be. I said, it's like, and I equate it to like a kid who's like playing Little League baseball. You go to do the Little Leagues, then you go into the Pony Leagues, and maybe Legion Ball, and you play high school, college. Then maybe you're lucky, get into minors, and you work it. Next thing you know, you're in the World Series.
Yeah.
You know, and you're up to bat. Now, maybe you get nervous for a second. You think, wow, I can't believe I'm here. But then on the other hand, you got to say to yourself, but wait a minute. What did you spend all that time doing? Didn't you want to get here? And so if you're here, you have to then take stock of yourself and say, wait a minute. This is what I wanted to be, and I'm here. So what so let's go. Saddle up, jump on the horse, and let's go. And once I did that, it was all those thoughts happened like almost instantaneously. And it's like, relax, man. This is what you've prepared for this moment. Now the moment's here. Go with it. And once you've done that, and then it makes it a little easier every time you're with somebody. Don't get me wrong. You still get excited. I mean, when I work with Robert Redford, there's a certain thing. When I work with Cher, people, you can't help but think, oh, you want to say, man, I love you, man.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're now part of your peer group. You're doing something together, and you just feel grateful that you're able to do that.
And you come out with an iconic character in the biggest movies of all time, Godfather.
Well, I still get a lot of Joey Zaza screaming when I'm in an airport, and screaming in the sense of, "Hey, Joey Zaza!"
Every time I told somebody who was coming on the show, Joey Zaza, Joey Zaza.
I know.
Well, no, it's a lot more than that. You got to read. There's pages and pages and pages of this man's career.
No, hey, look, I signed more pictures. I think more pictures as Fat Tony for people than I do as David Rossi from Criminal Minds. You know what I mean? So my cartoon character, I think I've done it over twice as long.
Let's grab a glass of wine before we forget. Everybody knows that he plays a great character on The Simpsons almost as long as The Simpsons has actually been on television. Two Italian guys here. We're going to have a nice glass of wine. We do have a little Alibas that was brought to us by our friends down in Foggio Italian Market in Delhi, which is in Lakewood.
Yeah.
They like to say that there's not a lot of good Italian places in Los Angeles. That's not true.
No.
There are.
With a name like Foggia, look at that.
Foggia, because...
Like Foggia.
There. Perfect.
How about that?
Foggia Italian Market in Delhi. They're in Lakewood.
And it's Foggia, it's not Foggia.
I don't say it right either. It's supposed to be
Foggia.
Foggia, yeah, which is a town in Italy.
I'm all for it. Good thing they don't name it after the town. My family's Acqua Viva della Fonte.
I read that. I couldn't even say it.
That'd be a little long on the menu, Acqua Viva della Fonte.
So you have Sicilian in you.
That's on my father's side. That's Cala
Cheers,
Sciabetta.
thank you.
So,
thanks for coming over to us.
My pleasure. I'm half Sicilian and half Barese, which means my father's side is from Sicily, from a town called Cala Sciabetta, which I've been to. And my mother's side is from a town called Acqua Viva della Fonte, which I've been to many times. And I'm very close to my family there. My cousin, Nicola, owns what they call an agriturismo, which is a farm they turned into a small resort. And it's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it's not fancy or elaborate, but it's beautiful. It's built on the ruins of a farm that dates back to the 1600s. So these stone buildings, and it's very pastoral. It's like in a rural part of Italy, in Puglia, which is on the Adriatic side of Italy, across from Naples. But I'm very close to my Italian roots.
Do you get to go?
Yeah, I mean, they come here, we go there. I've been there numerous times. I mean, these last few years have been tough with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
But I'll be getting out there again soon.
I'm hoping the world is going to get up and real soon so I can go back to doing what I was doing. So let's touch on that too, because you've also directed, produced, and right now one of our buddies is someone you're directing. And his name is Ronnie Marmo. He is in a play. The play is called I'm Not a Comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce,
Right.
which is the true story of the life of Lenny Bruce, who was a famous comedian way back in the day, but he became more famous for his foul mouth than he did for his performances, which is kind of apropos for what's going on in today's world, because now they want to cancel everything that all these comedians are saying, but they should really go back into history and take a look at what was being done anyway.
Right.
And it's really not offensive if you learn how to just enjoy what somebody's saying.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, like if you get to see the play, I mean, we've been doing it for close to 5 years now. Right? We've had a long run here in LA, It's run in New York. It's currently in Chicago, and we're also touring it around. It's going to Florida next week, and then back to Chicago. But anyway, yeah, Lenny Bruce was way ahead of his time. It's because of him you had people like George Carlin, Richard Pryor, a lot of them that followed in his footsteps. Of like, the First Amendment is there for a reason. I mean, there's, we have to be. You can't put shackles on people's brains. You know what I mean? Part of it, I blame it on lack of education, the way that people just we start being afraid of words, and you know what I mean, as opposed to the intent behind the words, which is what you should really be afraid of.
Right.
Then we got a problem. Then I think we just almost have a lack of understanding.
That's a great point, intent.
Yeah.
Because you could say the same thing in two different ways. I'll kill you, meaning you really want to hurt somebody. I'll kill you.
Exactly.
Meaning I'll hug you.
Exactly. So I mean, so really, we have to be very, very careful about what we consider, dangerous and what we consider not.
Ronnie Marmo is a fantastic actor. He's been in a lot of movies. He was on a soap opera for a while. We've done a couple of projects together, and I saw the play many times. I saw the play when he was in rehearsals. I saw the play in Chicago. I saw the play in New York. I saw the play in New Jersey, and I've seen it here in Los Angeles many times. And I just can't believe the way he pulls it off, because he holds on to that guy.
Oh, he
becomes that guy.
No, he does. He's channeled it. I mean, it was such a privilege to direct him in that show, because he's such a, he wrote it. It's such a big part of his life. He worked on it for like 5 years before he even came to me and said, Joe, I got this thing, interested in maybe directing it. I'd like you to just see what I've got. And then when I saw the material, one of the watch sentences I live by, at least in my occupation, is, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And meaning, I give all credit to the writing. I mean, if the material is good, you got a shot. If the material sucks, you got to, you're in a tough spot. But he did such a brilliant job of creating this play, of putting this material together, that and he does a wonderful job of doing it.
It does. It has a lot of moments. It could be depressing at some times, but it could be funny at some times. And I love the way he performs it, and I'm glad that you're involved in that. And he and I did one of the first, I'd say, major movies I did was Pizza with Bullets. And I got a part in the movie because someone saw me doing stand-up at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood.
Great.
And he says, I got a great role. We're doing a mob movie, but it's really, really funny. And I'm like, that's it. I'm finally going to get to play a mobster. So I went down to the auditions, and when I walked in, this lady looks at me and she goes, we're not auditioning the police officers till next week. I says, I'm not here to read for that. They told me to come and read for Guido. And all that movie, that's been cast. And I go, what? They told me to come here today. Ronnie Marmo's playing that character. And I go, who's that? I really didn't know him yet. I kind of knew of him from the Feast of San Gennaro. And so all of a sudden, the director comes in the room, Robert Rothbard, he goes, what's going on? Oh, this young man thinks he's here to read for one of the roles. And he goes, oh, he don't have to read for nobody. He's cast. You should see this guy do stand-up comedy. He's perfect. He's going to play the priest.
Perfect.
So when I went down to the set for the first time in my life, I took that moment, and my scenes were with Talia Shire and Vinnie Pastore.
Great.
Now I walk into a room, and here's Talia Shire. So I was in a panic, and it was only her and I who had the lines. And I'm supposed to be a priest who would rather eat food and try to become a mobster, and this guy's in a coma. So she says to me, we do the lines and everything is fun, and when the scene was over, we shot a couple times, she looks at me and she goes, you're the comedian, right? They were talking about you. And I said, yeah, I'm the comedian. She goes, am I being funny, you think? Is it coming across funny? And I went like this, can you wait a minute? And I went and called my brother, Ed, you're not going to believe this, all right? Adrian wants to know if I think she's funny.
Right.
Then we got to be friends, and I'm saying to myself, wow, these are all just regular people.
Of course they are.
This is just fun.
That's great. It's funny you mentioned Ty, because obviously I worked with her on Godfather 3.
Yes, of course.
And Vinnie Pastore, I shot him in the last Don, which was another Mario Puzo miniseries.
Is that right?
Yeah. I think I put a bullet in him at some point. Anyway.
Luckily enough, I went on to do some shows with Vinnie Pastore in live events. And then after a few years, I ended up doing a pilot with Ronnie Marmo called Silent Partners. Now I have to play a wise guy who's silly, because they saw me doing stand-up.
Right.
It's nice to get a job when you're not auditioning.
Yeah.
Someone just sees you and says, "Oh, hey, you're perfect for this," and away you go.
Well, that's the best audition in a way.
Yeah.
They're seeing you do what you do. You know.
Yes. So I had a scene with Ronnie, and we could not stop laughing. Every time they said action, we just fell out.
That's great.
You can't stop laughing.
Oh, I know. Well, he adores you.
Because you look at me, we can't take each other seriously.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Well, also, you look like frickin' Freck. I mean, him. I mean, you look. You're like.
Frickin' Frack.
Well, I mean, you're kind of like opposites. You know what I mean?
Extreme opposites.
He's got that dark look and all that. And you got that. What's great is though because you like I have cousins in Italy. My cousin Costantino Carnavale in Italy. He looks just like you.
Oh yeah.
He's got the blue eyes. He's got the light hair. You know what I mean? And you know everybody thinks Italians all look like me. You know, or the darker version of me when my hair was black. You know, but that's a myth. The point is. You know, there's even in the play, A View from the Bridge, there's that character, the Sicilian who's got the blue eyes.
Oh, is that right?
There, yeah. So I mean, but that's so perfect. I mean, I love that. I love that aspect of it.
Pass over that plate. Let's try to have some little hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah, look at this.
Hors d'oeuvres is English for antipast.
Yes, it is. Thank you for
My family says antipast, which is antipuesto. What did you say?
Yeah, you always chopped it up. It's just like gabagool. You know, it's capicola, it becomes gabagool.
I never knew it was capricola till I moved to California.
Prosciutto is prosciutto.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you say sauce or gravy?
We said gravy.
We say gravy too.
Oh yeah, Chicago and New York, I think, had shared that thing. In New Jersey.
But it was my mother that did that, so I didn't know any other way.
No,
my mother
I
said
think
it was
everybody's
great.
mother did it then, because my mother did it, my aunts did it, everybody.
I never heard
did it.
sauce till I moved to California.
No, I agree with you.
Try whatever you like.
Yeah, I like that.
There's marinated olives, marinated
That's
mushrooms.
Yeah.
This is super sad. That's spicy.
Mhm.
This is pepperoni, cheese. Two kinds of cheeses. There's provolone or provolone, mozzarella, and those little hot cherry peppers.
Those are great.
Inside is another type of cheese. I forget what it is, but these are the best.
Yeah, beautiful.
This is Italian finger foods.
Mm-hmm.
Regular kids go get snacks like cookies and potato chips.
That's the
Italians,
word-
this is what we
That's
have.
the word antipasta comes from.
Yes,
It means,
they made songs out of it.
yeah.
And speaking of songs, before I forget, you were so blessed to play the role of Dean Martin,
I was blessed.
the Rat Pack.
I love doing that movie. Yeah.
You swallow that, and I'll take you down another road while you're eating that, because he makes this look so delicious. He put his provolone cheese with the pepperoni together.
Mhm.
That takes a while.
Great.
I'm lucky enough to be the opening act for Dean Martin's daughter, Dina.
Mm.
I met Dina Martin when I was hosting the Feast of San Gennaro in Los Angeles back in the day when we were thriving. There were Italians everywhere.
Right.
We were having a ball. I was on a board of directors.
It was a great event.
Oh, and I met every celebrity you could think of. And one of the greatest things for me is every night I performed, I got a gig. Hey, Mike, you want to go on the road? Hey, you're really good. Hey, I'm Louis Prima Jr. Would you like to go? Hey, I'm Frank Stallone.
Right.
Hey, and away I went.
Mhm.
Started going with everybody. And Dina was in the forefront. And so she asked me to do a bunch of shows, and I did a bunch of shows with them, and I had a lot of fun.
That's great.
There's one thing about being a stand-up comedian when you can go out at night and you are the headliner, you wear jeans and a t-shirt, or you graduate, now you're doing theaters and you're seeing 1,000 people, 2,000 people that put on a suit. But when you get to go on stage with what I call a Hollywood icon, you put on a tuxedo and you put that tie on tight.
Right.
This reminds you, don't curse in front of our audience. Do the amount of time that you're asked to do, and you get to stand in front of the orchestra, and the orchestra can't leave. They have to sit through the comedy. They play you on and they play you off. Then you introduce the icon. She comes on stage, and you know you're doing good when she does throwbacks to your act.
Exactly.
And when he said this and when he said that, and when Mike said this, and then. So I got to do this with many different people, but now you get to play her father.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, and as you can imagine, when I first was offered the role, there was a little bit of trepidation in a way, because you're thinking, oh, how do you play Dean Martin? Because I idolized the guy. But yet on the other hand, I thought, if I could not do it, because it was like, I don't know, I would always feel like, oh my God, I had a shot to play Dean Martin. But what I wanted to do was do all the research I could do on it, which I did. And one thing, and that's how I got to know Dina, was there's something that come out with the press. Because what had come out in the press, there was some talk that, and I think it might have come from maybe somebody in the Sinatra family, that they didn't wanted to be involved in maybe in the production of the movie. but it was HBO film, and HBO was kind of like, no, we're all right. And so something leaked out to the press like this is going to be this is going to be terrible. They're going to defame those guys, And I thought when I saw this like little blurb, I thought this is not true. I would have never even taken the job if it was going to be like insulting to like the Dean Martin family. So through a friend of a friend, I was able to get a phone number and call Dina Martin to say,
You didn't know her?
no, I didn't know her.
Really?
No, but she, I think it might have been through Tom Dreesen, but it was ever through somebody made the contact for me, and I was able to reach her and say, it wasn't even a phone number. I think it was an email, and I sent the email saying, just want you to know I'm going to be playing your father in this movie. And there's been some talk I know about that it's going to be defaming to them and to their legacy of the Rat Pack. I said, I'm inviting you to come to the set anytime you want to come, and I'll meet with you. I'll let you read the script. I said, just want you to know I have such respect for your father. I would never even do this job. That was the case. And she got right back to me, said, thank you so much. No, I'm not going to come to the set. I trust, what you're saying, and you can go ahead and make your movie. And then when it was over, when the whole thing came out, I was lucky enough I got both an Emmy and a Golden Globe nomination for that movie. And she was the very first person to call me and congratulate me for it. And I just thought, man, we're talking about a class act. We've been, of course, very close ever since. I've seen her perform many times.
That's just a fantastic story. So that we could take these stories even further, which is what I enjoy. That I was lucky enough to be on the dais with your roast. So the Dina Martin roast that she was trying to do like her dad.
Right.
I had done 3 of them. I think she only did 3 of them. We stopped because of the pandemic. So she calls me up, and you also mentioned Tom Dreesen. Tom Dreesen is a very famous, well-known comedian from Chicago,
Right.
who was one of the long-running opening acts for Frank Sinatra.
Right, it's like 11 years.
Done a lot of shows with Tom Dreesen. He's a great guy. And quite honestly, if I ever get into my head about all this business, I call Tom.
Yeah,
He'll settle you down.
that's true.
Mike, relax.
Piano,
It's okay. Mike. So we go out to do the roast, and it's going to be for Joe Mantegna, Vegas. Mike, you got to come. I'm like, of course I'm coming. Don't even tell him I'm coming. I'm a loaded gun. And I remember getting out there, and we saw Joe Piscopo, and of course your castmates from Criminal Minds.
Right.
Who I don't know. I didn't know the castmates, but I knew the other people on the dais.
Right.
And I know Joe Piscopo very well. So Joe Piscopo comes over to me and goes, I don't think I prepared well enough for this. And I go, come on, if you're only going to do 5 minutes, you can do anything you want. He goes, what are you going to do? I says, I wrote this whole roast. It's going to be perfect. And he goes, you should probably just do your act. And I go, why would I do that? It's got to be about Joe. And he goes, well, I don't know. I just think you'd hit a home run if you did your act. And I go, well, I'll make my act about Joe. And that's exactly what I did. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I roasted you a long time ago before this. I think you were getting an achievement award, but you were sitting next to a female police officer who was becoming chief of police or
Yes,
something.
I
This
do
is
remember.
a while ago.
I do remember, yes, I do remember.
And it came through Doug DeLuca and all these
Right.
city officials, and back in the day when we knew all these people who had something to do with the Feast of San Gennaro. So he called me down and he goes, you're going to roast these 2. And I was working on something else. I didn't have time to write anything, but I just remember saying, you know what, I enjoy improving. And sometimes I think I can get away with doing things by making people think I don't know what I'm talking about on purpose.
Right.
So I screwed up your careers. I made your career her career, and her career your career.
Perfect.
So I kept looking at you going, you're the best cop I've ever seen.
Right.
When you patrol, and people are like, this idiot. And then other people go, he's outsmarting everybody in this room.
Exactly.
He knows.
Exactly.
And I actually have fun doing that.
Sure.
And that's why I want to thank you for introducing me to Robert Davi, because in the beginning it was kind of nerve-wracking because he does have that big orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
and he really is a great singer.
He is. Yeah.
And his audience is a lot of stars.
Yeah.
So the first few shows I was kind of nervous. Then we started getting comfortable with each other. And then we did some performances over at Vibrato. And that's when the audience was only 150 people, and they're paying a lot of money, so I could kind of goof around like I'm part of the Rat Pack for real.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put his name in my act. So instead of saying Vinny get the bat, I said Davi get the bat, and it just started to work. But the one show we had, and I kept saying, if only Joe Mantegna was here to see this. There's 10,000 people in Long Island. He's a 32-piece orchestra. The original xylophone player was there. Maybe you know his name, Emil. He used to play with Sinatra.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He since had passed. But there's all these famous players on stage. And Davi's backstage, and there must have been 30 people asking for autographs and talking and getting in his ear. And all of a sudden you hear him go, I need everybody out of the green room. I'm getting ready to perform. Everybody get out of the green room. So I walked right the hell out of the green room. And he goes, Marino, where you going? And he just told me to get out of the green room. Not you. This is for us. And I go, oh, give me a fucking heart attack. I got to go on. I'm petrified. No, you're not.
Exactly.
You're not afraid.
Yeah, he almost killed James Bond. You got to worry about him, yeah.
Thank you for introducing me to him. So then we move into Criminal Minds, probably one of the biggest hit TV shows on television.
Yeah, we had a good run, 15 years, and there's talk. There's talk of bringing us back, and so we'll see if that materializes. But that's the current, kind of thing that's out there.
Well, tell us about the show that you're on now.
Well, I'm on a series called As We See It on Amazon Prime, which is a show that's very close to my heart because it was created by Jason Katims, who did Parenthood and Friday Night Lights. And it's about these 3 young adults on the autism spectrum. It's personal to me because my oldest daughter has autism. And,
right.
And these 3 actors all literally are on the spectrum. And my hat's off to Amazon and for Universal Studios and everybody involved with it because they put their money where their mouth is. Because we didn't just, it's not like stunt casting. They went out, they found these 3 wonderful young actors who are all on the autism spectrum, but they're just tremendous performers in their own right. And then they hired 12 people on the crew who are all on the autism spectrum. Now that's something you don't necessarily have to do, or you wouldn't think they would do, but they did. And they also had a person on the set acting as a liaison with them, somebody from a group called the Miracle Project. So there was always somebody there. If there was any questions or this or that or concerns, which of course there wasn't. It worked so beautifully. Everybody, working together and understanding that it was going to be, moments might be a little different than what was the norm. But we shot 8 episodes. It just dropped a few weeks ago on Amazon Prime, and the reviews couldn't have, I couldn't have written better notices for it. So I was just happy to see that because I just think they were beautiful, beautiful episodes. We did 8 episodes. We're waiting to hear if we're going to continue, but regardless of it, I'm just so proud to be a part of it because it's about something, and it's really, and since it's streaming as opposed to network television, they don't have to cut any corners. They don't have to censor themselves because some of the topics we get into, because it's a dramatic show, just like it's scripted and all that, but we're able to say and show and do things that could be sometimes shocking, very funny, entertaining, all of it. There's no boundaries on it, which is what life is. There's no boundaries on life.
What does it mean by the spectrum? You keep saying there are
people because when people, the best definition of autism, one of the best definitions I've heard is when somebody said, when you meet a person with autism, you've met a person with autism, and by that it means that the spectrum of people on the autism spectrum is so wide. I mean, it goes from, you take Elon Musk basically said that he's on the spectrum. This is the guy that created Tesla, what I mean? So you can have brilliance,
right? Oh, okay.
Depending on how it manifests itself in you. And yet on the other hand, you can have people on the autism spectrum who can't speak or can't, like when my daughter is somewhere, she's somewhere in between. I mean, she's going to be 35 years old. She's brilliant in some things, in terms of her art, in terms of her memory, in terms of certain aspects. But on the other hand, she likes going to Disneyland and seeing the princesses.
Right.
She's still 10 years old in some aspects, and certain things she can't do. And her speech is almost like language is her second language, and we don't know what the first language is. So the spectrum is this huge, wide-ranging thing, and people on that spectrum could fall into anywhere on it. But we have learned more and more about it over the years, And the main thing is to understand it, be accepting of it, and know that we all got to live on this planet together and
Right.
get by.
I'm glad you clarified that because I've had a guest on my show. His name is Paul Simmons, and he has a radio show. It's 10 years, all dedicated to autism, and it's called Autism Radio. Now, he came on my podcast. I had done a bunch of charities to raise money for autism awareness on the East Coast. So he comes on my podcast, and he's talking about his son. His son is 17 years old, and some days are okay, but some days at 3 o'clock in the morning, for whatever reason, he'll just leave the house and they got to go find him. And I says, well, you know, I have a cousin and their child is autistic. And when I had a Thanksgiving party, this is before COVID, my cousin called me and said, I need you to hide all your TV clickers. And I said, why? And he goes, because my son's going to come over the house, he's going to find your clickers and he's going to put them in the toilet. It's what he does.
Yeah, I get it.
And I says, oh, wow. So I explained that to Paul Simmons. A week later, he calls me up and we inked a deal where I was going to perform somewhere and do a fundraiser for him. And he said, and by the way, your cousin's name is Trent, isn't it? And I said, yeah, how would you know that? And he goes, because he's been in my class for 7 years. Not even realizing we were talking about the same people.
Wow.
It was just an experience.
Yeah.
So when I told him that I was going to have you on the show, he said, could you mention my name to Joe? And could you mention what I'm doing? Because Joe has a daughter that's autistic.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
I remember when she was little, she used to, they had these talking kind of like dolls, and she would flush those down the toilet. And I remember once I used one of those, you know, things to, you know, like, to pull, you know, thing out, whatever they call it.
Plunger.
Like a plunger, but like with a screw thing that went down. And I remember it was blocking up the toilet. And I've got the thing down there and I'm screwing it. And all of a sudden you can hear the thing talking underwater. You hear the thing go, the doll was talking because I had somehow activated it with the thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, this is okay. This is part of the game here, you know. But
you know what? That brings us to a little bit of a joke that I'm going to have to spring on you.
yeah.
Remember I told you before we started the podcast tonight that I have all these antiques all over my house in New Jersey. Well, some of the antiques were given to me by my mother and father in the 60s. They're called the G.I. Joe doll.
Right.
I have 3 1964 G.I. Joe dolls. And they're in mint condition. I have all the outfits and all the adventures that they had done. But maybe 15 years ago, I came up with a joke about the G.I. Joe doll was a mobster. His real name was G.I. Giovanni. When you pulled the string, he told you to go fuck yourself. Now, this joke is killing, and I extended it. His gumata was Barbie doll. He used to whack Ken, and I made the whole thing. So I decided, well, what if I videotape these dolls?
Right.
Well, people are going nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's now me imitating the doll. They're Italians. I got Downtown Ronnie from Brooklyn, but he's the Jewish doll and he does their taxes. It's so stupid. So we found some people to do some voices, and you know what I'm saying to myself? Wait a minute, you got to do a voice in one of this.
Oh God.
Maybe one of these days when I'm shooting them, you give me some voice because it's so silly.
Oh yeah.
But it's hilarious.
Hey, Fat Tony, the character I've been doing for 32 years now on The Simpsons, that came from my Uncle Willie. Because my Uncle Willie used to talk like that. Because I got cast in that role right after the Godfather movie came out. This was the Simpsons was only their 3rd season, and they decided, I guess, to create this mobster character. And probably because I had played Joey Zaza in The Godfather, who had just come out, they probably figured, well, that actor might be a good choice because he's you know, he's the kind of the gangster of the year now at this movie. So I get the call. Now I come in, I see the script, I think it's very funny. I'm happy to do it. I'm thinking it's a one-shot deal. But I'm thinking, I don't want to sound like me because that's Joey Zaza. And I'm thinking, I don't want to make Fat Tony the same character I'm playing in this movie, The Godfather, be like, you know, Coppola will go crazy.
Right.
So almost instantaneously, I have to think about how am I going to do this character. So I'm thinking about my Uncle Willie, who has been like a dad to me because my father died when I was fairly young. And my Uncle Willie, one of my mother's brothers, was very close to me. But he talked like this. He's got that kind of voice because he smoked all his life.
Yeah.
That's the way he talked. So when I did my first lines at the read-through of The Simpsons, I started to do the lines like this. And I'm waiting for somebody like to say something, like the director to go, whoa, what are you doing, you know? But nobody said nothing. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll just keep talking like this. And I've been talking like that now for 30 years. And nobody said anything, so I figured I guess it's working. And one time, I think 15 years into it, I brought Willie to one of the recordings, because I do about 2 or 3 a season. And I remember walking in with him, I go, I want to introduce somebody to you. I said, Willie, say hello. Yeah, hi, how are you, everybody? And they're all like, oh my God, it's him. It's the source. But anyway, so you never know where a character's going to come from and what your inspiration's going to be.
What was it like to actually work with Francis Ford Coppola?
Well, I mean, he's
Nice guy, fun.
Absolutely, he's the maestro. I mean, here's a guy that, first of all, I sense that his movies are like opera. You know what I mean? In a sense, they have that kind of majesty and that kind of, and he's that kind of person. He would have done well in the Renaissance. You know what I mean? You put him back in the 1500s, Francis would do just fine, because here was a man who gobbled up life. I mean, the wine, the fact that he's in the wine business now makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And that whole Italian cultural thing, and yet he's such an intelligent person and such an imaginative person. So all you got to do is look at, and his movies, and not just the Godfather series. I mean, any of his other films, and yeah, I mean, I consider it such a privilege to have been able to work with, obviously one of the greatest, cinematic.
Do you keep in touch with a lot of these people? Hi, how are you?
Well,
Merry Christmas.
Ironically, you mentioned this because, what's today's? Today's the 14th, and about a week from now, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the movie, Godfather, the original Godfather. It's the 50th year of it.
Is it really?
Yeah, and they're having an event at Paramount Studios, which I'm invited to, because they're going to name one of the streets at Paramount Studio for Francis for Coppola. Which they do that because it'll be the Jimmy Stewart Street or
you have a street in Chicago.
I got a street in Chicago. It's not the same as on Paramount lot.
No, it's Chicago.
It's Chicago, yeah, that's true.
Chicago.
I got one in Chicago, one in Cicero, where I went to high school, so that's kind of nice.
And you got one on the Hollywood Boulevard.
And I got the Star. Yeah, I'm not. I think it's great, but I'm going to be going to that event, and so I'll see Francis there, and there was a thing. God, must have been maybe 10 years ago. He'd wanted to do a huge mini series about the history of television, and he brought in a whole bunch of actors. And I was flattered that he had me come in as well. We spent a whole day at Paramount just reading what he had written, and it was like 5 hours worth of stuff, 5-6 hours. But it never got made, I don't think. But that's what I mean. That's the kind of imagination and spirit and talent he has. He'll do something. He wants to. He'll throw everything into it and see what he's got, and he may or may not do it, and then moves on to something else.
Did you ever have a time in this industry that you said to yourself, what am I doing? This is too hard. Was there years that you weren't as successful as you were the year before? And then all of a sudden there's a year that's just tremendous, and then another year where it's not all that easy.
Well, the early years were difficult, but I always enjoyed it, and that's the advice I always give people, young people, especially when they ask me, so how do you get ahead in this business? What's the secret? I go, look, there's no secret. I said, but you got to love what you're doing, and you have to love I know this is an old saying, but it's so true. You have to love the journey more than the destination.
Right.
Because if you're having fun on the ride, there's no guarantee that you're going to get to the destination you want to get to. But if you're enjoying the ride, it really doesn't even matter.
That's great advice, because in my little world, when I'm on the ride, I'm always looking at the destination. And I never really look at, well, wait a minute. There's thousands of people here to watch this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then I go into my mind going, yeah, but it's only 2,000. Why isn't it not 3,000?
Well, that's natural, though. I mean, it's okay to strive. You want more. You want to do more. You want to get more. But if there comes a time when you say to yourself, I hate this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Then you got to start saying, maybe it's time to maybe look in another direction.
Wow, yeah. So
as long as you could put that other foot in front of another and say, no. I remember when I won the Tony Award in '84. I remember I was working professionally from that point, from 1969 to '84, just doing anything. Making a few bucks here, being broke here. So I remember after that night of the Tony Awards, they have obviously a big dinner afterwards. And I remember one of the press people said to me, what's it like? How does it feel to win a Tony Award? I said, I feel like I won the lottery, but I've been buying tickets for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that. In other words, I felt like I put the time in. you know, and there was no guarantees I was going to get this jackpot for whatever it's worth. And it wasn't even winning an award that's important. It's the acknowledgement of, okay, well, maybe this is something I can do for a living, in essence.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like somebody's acknowledging the fact that, yeah, we like what you do. Just like your show. People are watching this now. You've got a huge audience. They're not being forced to do this. They're doing it because they want to do it. You know? There you go. And so you earned it, you know. And this is
Yes.
this is the road you're on. You know?
I enjoy all of this stuff, and I do enjoy going to work. I do tell people all the time, I can't wait to go.
Yeah.
I want to get on
There
stage.
you go.
They say to me all the time, aren't you sick of flying? I'm like, no, I can't wait to get on the plane. I can't wait to go get on stage.
Right.
I've gotten to the point in my career where I don't really rehearse until I get on stage. I rehearse on stage, and people say to me, where'd you come up with that? I'm like, in the parking lot.
That's great.
I want to try everything. I want to be part of an ensemble. That's why nowadays I like working either with my own characters, because I feel like I'm in a scene with somebody else.
Yeah.
I like doing the videos that I do, and I like doing the web series that I do. I like doing this, but I want to work with other actors because I want to exercise that muscle. I think one of the greatest things for me is when we get to do stuff with guys like you and Dina, and everybody says to me, what was it like to go to the Bootlegger? Remember the Bootlegger? Which is the
Yes.
restaurant we went to
yes,
when
yes,
we were
yes,
done.
yes, yes, Vegas.
When we done.
Uh-huh.
And everybody says, I saw you in there. There's a lot of stars going there. Got all those red chairs in there and all the famous people. What is that like? I'm like, well, this is what it's like. You keep your mouth shut and you open your ears and you'll hear stories that will blow your mind. And I love sometimes when you talk and you explain this, you talk about these stuff because it gives us more light and inspiration to keep on going. And when Dina talks about who her neighbors were and how she used to hang around with Desi Arnaz Jr. and her uncle Frank Sinatra and her uncle Jerry Lewis, and you're just like, wow, I don't need to say anything. You just sit there eating.
Right.
And then I remember, I keep this. This is my coin. I did a lot of military tours, and I know you love the military, and I have a lot of these coins. But this coin is from Joe Mantegna. He gave me this little star from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's not the one from the street. It's the one that he gave me. This little character on the back.
Yeah, that's Hirschfeld. Yeah, there was that famous cartoonist for the New York Times, and it was like everybody hoped that every Friday he would draw a caricature of somebody, you know, that was kind of
That's hilarious.
popular. And that's from Glengarry Glen Ross. It's from after I won the Tony Award. He drew that particular issue of the New York Times, and it's become my logo.
Glen
I know
Ross.
Jack Lemmon used his Hirschfeld as his logo, and a lot of different people. My daughter she bought a print of George Harrison's, because Hirschfeld did one of George Harrison when he was in the Beatles, you know, and you can buy prints, you know, stuff like a lot of different Hirschfelds, and so he was just he lived to be in his 90s, but he was the greatest probably caricaturist.
I love all those mementos. I love all those stories. I love everything we got going on. I love you, and thank you so much for coming to hang out. I always say goodnight by telling everybody where they can find you, but I think they know.
Whatever, you go to joemantegna.com and it'll tell you, I guess, what I'm up to.
You can go to joemantegna.com. It'll show you what he's up to. You can watch his new series that's out on Amazon Prime, right?
Right, Amazon Prime, As We See It, it's called.
And you're going to see a lot more from Joe Mantegna. If you're in Hollywood, why not walk down the Hollywood Walk of Fame and go see his star next to Columbo.
Yeah, exactly.
Peter Falk, that everybody used to impersonate back in the day. And I wish you all the best, and I hope that we're going to do some projects together, whether it's going to be live, whether it's going to be another roast, or whether it's going to be something silly, something goofy.
I'd like nothing better.
I want to thank my producer who always makes these shows. Oh, we can finish with
and
that.
the Stella D'Oro cookie. I feel like I'm 5 years old again.
The reason why I brought the Stella D'Oro cookies is because when you go to an Italian deli, mostly anywhere in the world, this is where you get them.
Right.
In California, you're not getting them in Ralph's. You're not going to get them in any other.
They could have been made in 1957, and they'll still taste exactly the same.
They're hard, they crunch, but you dip them in your coffee, and that's what you get.
Right.
And you know what you get when you come to a Mike Marino show live from my mother's basement? We're going to send Joe home with some shirts.
Yeah.
I got some new masks.
Foggias.
Foggia Italian Market
We
and
take
Deli.
care of our people. We take care of our own.
Yes, because if we don't... Foggia Italian Market and Deli is in Lakewood, California. It's not too far from the Laugh Factory in Long Beach, California, where I'm going to be. And this week, why don't I invite you here on the internet? Thursday night is a birthday/comedy show at the North Hollywood Ha Comedy Club.
Great.
If you want to come,
Great.
we'll get you to come in the back door. Nobody will bother you. There's going to be some friendly faces there. We're going to have a lot of fun. I want to thank Tatiana Blue Shell for making our podcast fantastic. Isn't she great? She came here today. She made it fantastic. She does everything all the time, making it fantastic. Also, the web series Make America Italian Again. I don't know if you saw this show.
Oh, yeah,
Half
absolutely.
these comedians, because their families were in the industry as well. Marco Asante is Armando Asante's nephew. And what I did was, since the four of us were on tour, I said, well, why don't we film something during the day? So we brought Tatiana and her husband, Cody, who directs and edits and produces all of this stuff. And what was just us having fun turned into a money-making machine.
As it should.
Because it's silly.
As it should.
And, even your friend Robert Davi goes, when am I going to be in one of the episodes? I'm like, you want to do this? Hey, I'm funny. Well, all right. Cut the cheese, And, of course, Vinny Cesari and all these wonderful people. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and hanging out with me, Mike Marino, live from my mother's basement. Superstar actor, producer, director, Joe Mantegna. Remember, let's make America Italian again. My motto is, you don't know nothing, you don't see nothing, you don't say nothing. And how do I end every single one of my broadcasts? By always saying the same thing. I say, don't take no shit from nobody. You ready?
Yeah.
Don't take no shit from nobody. Good night.
Love it.
Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying watching my podcast live from my mother's basement. We're having a lot of fun and I'm going to have a lot of great guests on the show in the future. So if you like it, hit like. You could also leave a comment. You could subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch other funny videos. And you could also listen to my podcast on your favorite podcast app like Spotify and iTunes.